Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see everyone here. Changing gears slightly to talk about what we can do for each other. And so I call my talk, Amplify and Thrive. How many recognize this picture? Not enough. A couple hands. In October 2016, the Washington Post wrote an article about the Obama White House, and it went viral. And they talked about something that the women in the Obama administration were doing to get heard. And this is what they were doing. Read it for a moment. They would repeat, they would attribute, and force others to hear, so much so that Obama noticed and called upon women and junior aides. I want us to take a moment to think about this. The notion about amplifying each other so that we all have a seat at the table. Recently, one of the women on my team gave me a little keychain, which I thought was really cute. She said, and in that it's written, if you don't have a seat at the table, take a folding chair. Isn't that right? So, what can we do for each other? Before we walk into it being a very gender-like conversation, I want to point out to two things. One, usually when you say the men were forced to hear, it usually means the majority voice. Sometimes we can be the majority voice. It's about who is not being heard. What is the good idea that is not being heard? And two, I want to point out junior aides. So this wasn't just good for the women amplifying each other, it also meant the unheard voices were being heard. So what can we do about it? So I have 5 tips for you today, and I hope this will be helpful. First and foremost, pay attention. How often are we truly listening? Truly listening. You cannot amplify if you're not listening. How often are you observing why something is not being heard? This is not about repeating at rote. That helps too. That helps too, don't get me wrong. This is about truly observing when somebody is saying something, it is being heard, and when somebody else is saying something, it is not being heard. Why? Take the time to understand why a message isn't landing. Often, it may not be timed right, framed right, or it just could be that there is a decibel level that is not heard. That time you can repeat, but other times you have to observe why it's not being listened and call attention to that thing. What is that thing? Sometimes you need to articulate that thing. It may not be what is being said. It could be about values and skills. So understand how you articulate that thing. I remember recently we were having a discussion in one of our meetings, and somebody paused and said, what is going on here? I don't think we are acting according to our values. It wasn't about the topic, it was about the interaction. So similarly, when you are articulating about something, think about when you're talking, Jane has this great idea that will bring teams together. So this is not just about her idea, but also what it does for things. Does that make sense? Learn how you can tell the story better. How many of you have a good 30-second introduction to yourself? Few hands. How are you telling your story? How many of you are better at telling somebody else's story than yours? I see more hands, right? You're much better at saying, here's my friend, she's awesome at something. We did this little exercise at Google. I saw that Run Like a Girl, which is one of my favorite campaigns. And we did something different. We turned the spotlight on women and said, I am incredible because. And you should see how uncomfortable women were. To complete the sentence to say, I am incredible because. So I'm going to give you a homework. Before you leave today, you have to go to somebody and say, I'm incredible because. Try saying it, and then go back to your worlds and observe how many people say that about themselves and how they get heard. Not in those words, but in other ways, right? All right. The second thing, which is interesting always, is the spotlight can be shifted and it can benefit everybody. You can turn around if you are truly listening to say, 3 days ago I heard you say something. Would you like to say that in this audience? Something very easy for you to share the spotlight with somebody and have them have a moment to share their idea, which also means it's something that you are contributing. 3, provide access. Everybody talks about networking. Everybody talks about getting together and having people come and introduce. Everybody knows that. How often do you realize that you can actually introduce people to somebody you don't know at all? Take, for example, an event like this. There is a speaker, somebody among your friend really wants to, or there is someone among here. You don't need to know me. You could come and say, I have a really awesome friend. I think you should know her. How many people have tried that? That's great. I do it all the time. It's a great way for you to also know the person, but it's an awesome way for you to take the spotlight, give it to somebody, and tell that person's story. And how you tell that person's story makes you remembered. I want to underline that. How you tell another person's story makes you remembered. I remember often when somebody comes and tells me, here's somebody you need to know. Now comes the crux. How often do you share information that is yours? I'm not asking you to share anything classified for the benefit of someone else. How often have you shared your salary information? Couple hands. When you know that somebody is interviewing for a job that you can actually tell them how to negotiate. I have an awesome leadership team with very strong women and wonderfully supportive guys. Fantastic, good at their work, everything is great. But the guys on my team negotiated with me completely different than the women. They had more information. They had more information. This is the second thing we tested. When we go out there and we ask women about sharing information, about how does stuff work, how are you feeling, what about the culture, we tend to be safe. We tend to be safe. Safe doesn't get you forward. So provide access to information that is yours and be honest about it. Even if it means you're saying, I'm struggling with these things. These are the good things that are there. This is how you negotiate for things. Give that out. It's not always about being nice. It's not always about being nice. How many people have read Radical Candor? How many people apply it? Truly. Radical Candor says, you see this, right? Care personally and challenge directly. That's where you need to be. I'm going to tell you a story. It was just after I started at Google. I was invited to present to one of the big media companies out of Europe who had come in. I talked to them. They somehow decide that I am not giving them the information they need. Context is unnecessary. So they flip close their iPads and tell me, we're done here. And what's my reaction? I think, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have failed. Should I talk to my new boss? Are they going to escalate? What is going to happen? 17,000 things. Luckily, I had to walk between two buildings. It was about a 10-minute walk, so I called my husband. And I said, I completely messed up. He said, why? He said, did you mess up or did they not misunderstand? I said, it was a misunderstanding. I was actually giving the information that I give everybody. And then he asked me a question. First of all, he told me I was an idiot. which I don't think you should do. I don't think it's about radical candor. He said, oh, you're such an idiot, right? But then he asked me an interesting question. He said, weren't you the senior person in the room? I'm like, yes. Okay, instead of calling your boss and saying you messed up, call the salesperson who organized that meeting and tell him never to get you in front of a client without proper briefing. I hadn't owned my space. I hadn't felt it was okay for me to say I'm the senior person. I hadn't thought about what I needed in that moment. So, calling me an idiot apart, you need people who will tell you when you are not right, when you can do better. You need people who can have you, put you first and give you that real honest information about what you could do better. Make sense? So I always tell people, have this personal board of advisors, and if you don't have one, think about who they are. Somebody who can truly be honest with you when you need it. There's a second person I need to talk about. Andrew is a really good friend. He is an ex-Marine. He is also now coaches, senior executives and CEOs. And the other day, I was telling him something about an opportunity at work and something that was turning up. And he looked at me and he said, I think what you are saying to yourself and what you're saying to me are two different things. What you're saying to yourself is, I can take on this bigger thing. What you're saying to me is, there is an opportunity to bring these two things together and maybe that can happen. It's like, why aren't you saying, I am ready, I can go take this on? And that was an interesting question. And he turned to me and he said, tell me that you can do it. Just say, I can do it. And I was like, yeah, of course I can do it. He's like, no, tell me you can do it. You need sometimes, I call it making every important interaction anticlimactic. Test it out with somebody who's not going to be gentle with you and play it out. So that when you're walking into that high profile or that high stakes meeting, you have played it out. So then you have language, but you also are anticipating what could be said to you in return. Make sense? All right. The last bit. Advocate and attribute when somebody is not in the room. You know what is most important? And you discover that as you get more senior, but this is also true when it is junior. We talk about needing to go and network. We talk about needing to go and pitch. But honestly, your best opportunities come when somebody has identified you for the opportunity when you didn't even know the opportunity existed. That's called sponsorship. If there's one biggest gap by not having enough women in the room, is that we have fewer sponsors. So this is about not thinking of your network as only female. The best opportunity in my career that I got is because the head of human resources and people operations at Nokia, where I worked before Google, was at the table at a dinner where I was having a heated argument with this other person about what needs to happen in the app ecosystem. And when the opportunity came up at Nokia for having somebody to come and lead all of that, he said, I remember this one person at this table who was saying this thing, and maybe we should go have the talk. So pull people up, attribute, because it's the right thing to do. So with that, here's my turn. Thank you, Denise and SV Forum, for bringing all of us together to amplify and help each other thrive. Thank you.